Welcome to the sleeping mind and body. This space is designed for rest and gentle learning. You don't need to pay attention or remember anything. Simply listen and let your body settle. If you fall asleep, the video has done exactly what it was meant to do. Night has a way of lowering the volume of the world. Light becomes softer, shadows settle into familiar corners, and the usual edges of the day feel less sharp. The room can be ordinary and still, with nothing in particular being asked of it. A quiet kind of safety can exist in simple things. Walls holding their place, air resting at a steady temperature, distant sounds arriving and fading without needing attention. In that kind of low-light calm, one small movement continues without being summoned. Breath is already here. Before any thought about it, before any noticing, the body has been exchanging air with the space around it, again and again, in a living rhythm that does not wait for permission. Inhale, exhale. Not as a task, not as a technique, simply as an ongoing motion that belongs to being alive. Even when the mind wanders, even when awareness is elsewhere, the breath keeps its place. It rises, it falls. It happens in the background the way tides happen along a shore that no one is watching. And when it does come into awareness, it can be met as something already happening. Midstream, mid-cycle, already in motion. Air enters through the nose or mouth, passing into the throat, down into the branching pathways of the chest. Inside, the lungs receive it, soft tissue expanding in a gentle response. In the smallest regions, where air meets blood across thin membranes, quiet exchanges take place without any announcement. Oxygen moving inward, carbon dioxide moving outward. Chemistry in circulation, steady and unhurried, carried out in silence. The breath also has its shape, changing from moment to moment without needing a reason. Sometimes it seems to move higher, lifting the upper chest with a small expansion. Sometimes it spreads wider across the ribs, a subtle widening that can be more felt than seen. And sometimes it seems to travel lower, where the diaphragm, a broad, domed muscle beneath the lungs, shifts down on inhalation, making room, allowing the belly to move outward a little, then returning upward on exhalation as the space gently eases back. None of these patterns has to be chosen. The body tries one, then another. It adapts to position, to temperature, to emotion, to sleepiness, to the ordinary changes of an evening. The breath is responsive in this way, like a living metronome that adjusts its tempo without being told. It is already doing what it does. There is a natural rise and fall to it. Inhalation arrives as a quiet gathering, a slight filling. Exhalation follows as a release, an easing. Sometimes the pause after an exhale is noticeable, a small resting place where nothing is being pulled in or pushed out. And sometimes there is barely any pause at all, just a seamless turning, like a wave that has already begun to recede as it reaches the sand. In the night, as movement becomes less frequent, breath often changes in small, ordinary ways. Without effort, it can begin to feel softer at the edges. The muscles involved may do a little less, the movements becoming smaller, less pronounced. The sound of breathing, if there is any, can thin into something faint. And the sense of breathing can become more distant, as if it is happening slightly farther away, even though it is still right here. Physiology continues its quiet work. The brain receives signals from the body and from the blood, carbon dioxide levels, oxygen needs, the state of alertness, and it adjusts breathing as part of a larger balance. The autonomic nervous system, always active in the background, shifts its emphasis across the day and night, with parasympathetic influences often becoming more prominent during stillness. Breathing is woven into that shifting, not as a lever to pull, but as one of the many rhythms moving together. Attention can hover near the breath the way someone might listen to rain without needing to count the drops. A sense of air passing at the nostrils. A coolness on the way in, a warmth on the way out. The chest lifting slightly, then settling. The diaphragm moving, then letting go. The simple fact that there is a next breath, and then another, arriving on its own schedule. And always, the same quiet theme returns. It is already happening. Breath is already underway, already finding its pace, already changing with the night. Whether it is shallow or deep, quick or slow, smooth or uneven, it belongs. It is a living pattern, moment by moment, adjusting in the dark with the steadiness of a system that has done this every night before, and will continue, in its own gentle way, through the long, low hours. Breathing is already there, moving on its own, like a living rhythm that belongs to the body. It doesn't hold a single shape for long. It shifts in response, quietly, the way a tide changes along a shore. Sometimes it feels close and distinct, easy to notice. Sometimes it feels far away, almost like background sound. Both are ordinary. Both are part of how breath lies. Each breath is a small event of air and tissue and timing. Air enters through the nose or mouth, passes down into the throat, and continues through branching airways that become finer and finer, until the air reaches deep, delicate spaces where oxygen and carbon dioxide trade places with the blood. The heart receives that blood and keeps it moving, steady and patient, carrying what the breath has gathered, and returning what the breath will release. None of this needs to be announced to happen. It simply happens. The chest can rise a little, or hardly at all. The ribs can widen, then settle back. Underneath, the diaphragm, broad and quiet, changes its curve as it moves. It lowers and creates room, and then it eases upward again. Around it, smaller muscles and soft connective tissues make tiny adjustments. Even when it seems like nothing is moving, something is always moving. A gentle expansion, a gentle return. And the rhythm itself can vary. One breath may be smooth, the next slightly uneven. There can be a faint pause after an exhale, a moment of still air, as if the body is listening to itself. There can be a breath that arrives a little earlier, or leaves a little later. Sometimes the inhale is light and brief. Sometimes the exhale is longer, thinning out at the end. Breathing doesn't need to be perfectly regular to be natural. It is allowed to wander and then find its own steadiness again. Often, the breath behaves like water. It comes in, it goes out, with a soft, repeating motion. Sometimes it touches the edges of awareness, and sometimes it recedes. Awareness can rest on the breath for a moment, noticing the coolness of air near the nostrils, the subtle warmth of air leaving, the slight change in pressure in the throat. Then attention can drift elsewhere, to a thought, to a sound, to nothing in particular, while breathing continues faithfully in the background. Inside the lungs, there is a slow exchange taking place with every cycle. In the smallest air sacs, oxygen slips into the blood, and carbon dioxide slips out, ready to be carried away. The blood's chemistry shifts gently with this exchange, and nerves in the body register those shifts. The brain receives quiet signals from many places at once: airways, lungs, chest wall, blood vessels, an ongoing stream of ordinary information. This is part of why breathing can feel responsive and changeable. It is not just air moving, it is the whole body participating. When the surroundings become still, The breath often changes in small ways. In stillness, it can become softer at the edges. The movements can become smaller. The sound of it, if there is any sound at all, can fade until it is barely there. The inhale may feel like a gentle arrival. The exhale may feel like a gradual release, not pushed, not held, simply allowed to finish when it finishes. There may be moments when the rhythm seems to lose track of itself for a second, an extra small breath, a tiny pause, a slight hitch, and then, without any correction, it returns to its own familiar pattern. The body has many ways of keeping breathing going, many layers of rhythm makers and sensors and pathways. Variation is built in. It is part of the design. At night, in the quiet, the breath can become more distant in awareness, like a far-off tide. It doesn't disappear. It just becomes less central. The body continues to breathe the way it knows how, with gentle adjustments that match the moment. The diaphragm keeps its calm motion. The ribs rise and fall with minimal effort. The airways stay open and conduct air inward and outward, again and again. Sometimes you may notice the breath clearly, and sometimes you may only sense that it is happening. Sometimes the mind touches it lightly, naming it, inhale, exhale, without needing to explain it. And sometimes even that naming falls away, leaving only the quiet fact of a rhythm continuing. A living rhythm, responsive and changeable, returning again and again to the simple exchange of air, settling into the night in its own time. Breath is made of something very ordinary. Just air, arriving and leaving, again and again. It may come in through the nose, where the passage is narrow and warm, and where the air can feel slightly textured, or cool, or almost unnoticeable. Sometimes it comes in through the mouth instead, a more open doorway, with less resistance, as if the air has more space to move. However it enters, it drifts past the back of the throat, moving along a shared corridor of the body, quiet and familiar. There is no need for it to be loud to be present. The air continues downward, passing through the larynx and into the trachea, a steady tube that carries this simple movement toward the chest. Even in stillness, even in the dark, this pathway remains ready, shaped for the easy passage of air. Lower down, the single airway begins to divide. One branch becomes two, and then those branches divide again, into smaller and smaller tubes. The body repeats this pattern of branching, like a tree spreading into fine twigs, except the motion here is hidden beneath skin and bone. The air follows these openings without needing to choose. It simply flows where there is space. At the edges of those smallest airways, the lungs begin to feel less like tubes and more like soft tissue. Lungs are not rigid. They are springy and gentle, spongy in a quiet way, made to expand and settle back. They sit protected by the ribs, cushioned and held, filling and emptying as the breath passes through. Deep within the lungs are countless tiny air sacs, so small they can't be sensed one by one, and yet always there, receiving the air. They cluster together in delicate groups, like a fine foam. With each easy arrival of breath, these tiny spaces open, and with each departure, they soften back again. This opening and closing is subtle, and it goes on without needing attention. Across the thin walls of these air sacs, an exchange takes place. Oxygen, a part of the air, moves inward. Carbon dioxide, a part of the body's ongoing chemistry, moves outward. It happens quietly, on a surface so thin it can't be felt, yet wide enough to serve the whole body. There is no drama in it. Just a steady trade, moment by moment, that belongs to being alive. Oxygen can be thought of as a traveler carried along in the blood, moving towards cells that use it in their continuous work. Carbon dioxide can be thought of as the companion that returns, a natural byproduct of that work, ready to be released back into the air. Not good or bad. Not a sign of anything needing to change. Simply part of the cycle that repeats, like tides. And all the while, the breath keeps moving through the same familiar architecture. In and out through the nose or mouth. Down the throat. Through the branching airways. Into the soft lungs. Across the quiet surface of those tiny sacs. Then back again, retracing the path outward, leaving with whatever the body no longer needs to keep. It can be comforting, in a neutral way, to remember that breath is not a single place in the body. It is a passage. A moving ribbon of air that touches many regions without stopping, and without effort needing to be added. Sometimes the movement is felt higher, near the nostrils, where air enters with a faint coolness. Sometimes it seems lower, in the chest, where the ribs give a small response. Sometimes it is sensed in the belly, where the diaphragm makes room. The diaphragm is a broad, thin muscle beneath the lungs, shaped like a dome. When it eases downward, the lungs have room to expand, and air is drawn in. When it returns upward, the space becomes smaller and air drifts out. This can happen with a noticeable rise and fall, or so subtly that the body seems almost still. Even then, the exchange continues, quiet and exact. In the background, the nervous system keeps watch, adjusting breath the way it adjusts so many other rhythms. Researchers often describe how slower breathing is commonly associated with calmer brain activity, and with a shift toward the body's resting patterns. Not as a promise, not as a mechanism to be used, just as an observation seen across many people in many quiet moments. At night, when the world offers fewer demands, breathing often becomes softer on its own. The air may feel as if it is arriving from farther away, like a distant sound that doesn't need to be followed. The breath can seem thinner or smoother or more spread out in time. Inhalation rising, exhalation falling, with a gentle pause that sometimes appears between them, like space in a sentence. Air continues to travel in, and air continues to travel out, and inside the lungs those tiny sacs continue their silent exchange. Oxygen arriving. Carbon dioxide leaving. Cells continuing their steady life. The whole cycle held within the simple shelter of the ribs, the steady support of the spine, the quiet closeness of night. And as awareness comes and goes, the breath remains. A living, responsive rhythm made of air and tissue in motion. A soft pathway through the body, repeating without insistence, repeating without urgency, simply present, again and again. Somewhere beneath the lungs, tucked under the line of the ribs, a wide muscle rests like a soft dome. It is called the diaphragm. It does not look dramatic or busy. It simply occupies its space, spanning the body from side to side, separating the chest above from the abdomen below, and moving in small, faithful shifts that are easy to miss. With inhalation, that dome eases downward. Not forcefully, not in a way that demands notice, just a quiet widening through the lower part of the torso. The lungs make room for air, and the diaphragm lends its shape to that room. With exhalation, it returns, rising back toward its resting curve, letting the space become smaller again. This gentle down and up is not rushed. It is a rhythm that can continue in the background, even when attention drifts away. Often, the movement can be sensed indirectly, as a mild swell in the belly, or a slight opening along the lower ribs. The front of the abdomen may lift a little, then settle. The sides of the rib cage may widen by a fraction, then soften back inward. The changes can be so small they feel more like a suggestion than an action, a calm tide rather than a deliberate motion. Nothing needs to be arranged for it. The body simply allows it. Inside, there is steady cooperation. The diaphragm shifts, the rib muscles respond. The flexible tissues of the lungs expand and recoil. The airway remains open. The tongue and throat hold their shapes. Tiny muscles in the chest wall and neck sometimes help without being asked. Even the heart, nearby, continues its own dependable pattern, sharing the same quiet space. Much of this work happens without a spotlight, as though the body prefers to keep it simple and unannounced. The diaphragm is not alone in this. Breathing is a group effort, but it is an effort that rarely feels like effort. Most of the time, it does not require decision or planning. Nerve signals arrive, muscles answer, the breath comes and goes. Chemistry in the blood shifts slightly, sensors notice, and the next breath adjusts by a breath's width, subtle, responsive, and untroubled. It is a living process that listens and responds without commentary. In stillness, the diaphragm's movement often becomes smoother, almost economical. The belly may rise a little less, the ribs may travel a little less, and yet the exchange continues. Air reaches the lungs. Carbon dioxide leaves. The whole system maintains its balance in a calm, unassuming way. In the quiet of night, this can become even more muted, as if the body is speaking more softly to itself. Sometimes, the breath seems to settle lower, closer to the belly and the lower ribs, where the diaphragm does much of its work. Sometimes it feels higher, nearer the chest. Sometimes it shifts between the two without a clear reason. The body is adaptable. It uses the pathways that are available, and it changes them gently in response to temperature, mood, position, fatigue, and countless small conditions that never need to be named. Researchers often describe how slower breathing tends to be seen alongside calmer patterns in the nervous system, and how steady breathing can be associated with quieter brain activity. These are observations more than instructions, a way of noticing what often appears together in the body. And even without thinking about any of that, the breath continues to find its own pace, guided by internal rhythms that have been present since the beginning. The surface beneath the body remains steady. Whether it is a bed, a couch, or a chair, it holds without asking anything in return. The weight of the body is received by that surface, and the muscles that do not need to work can soften in their own time. In that support, breathing continues. The diaphragm still rises and falls, a broad muscle moving through a small range, keeping the inner space gently in motion. There can be comfort in how unremarkable it is. The diaphragm does not require praise or monitoring. It does not need to be reminded. Breath arrives, breath leaves, and between them there is a small pause that comes naturally, like a brief still point in a slow turning. And as the minutes pass in quiet surroundings, the breath may become less noticeable. The movements in the belly and lower ribs may grow subtler. The sound of air may fade to almost nothing. The diaphragm keeps doing its subtle work, a calm dome shifting and returning, while the body remains held, and the night remains wide and undemanding, and breathing continues, steady, responsive, and quietly enough. In the upper body, the breath can be felt as a small, quiet change in shape. Not dramatic, not announced. Just a subtle widening, a slight easing, a gentle returning. The ribs, arranged in their curved frame, make room in tiny increments. They rotate and lift by a fraction, then settle back, as if remembering where they began. With each inhalation, the chest may become a little more open. The spaces between the ribs can seem to lengthen, even if only by a soft impression. The sternum, at the center, may drift forward almost imperceptibly. And then, with exhalation, the whole structure softens again, the ribs moving inward and downward, the chest becoming quieter, smaller, closer to still. This motion is often so light it feels more like a shift in pressure than a movement you could point to. Air enters the nose or mouth, travels down the throat, passes the branching airways, and reaches the lungs, where millions of tiny air sacs quietly exchange gases with the blood. Oxygen diffuses in. Carbon dioxide diffuses out. No bright sensation is required for any of it. It happens in silence, beneath ordinary awareness, carried by a rhythm that keeps returning. The chest is one place that rhythm can show itself. Sometimes it is more noticeable there, as a gentle rise under the collarbones, a mild expansion across the front of the body. Sometimes it is barely present, with the chest seeming almost still, while the deeper movements happen lower down. The body does not hold to one pattern. It changes its emphasis without needing to explain why. At certain moments, breathing is more chest-led. The upper ribs participate a little more, and the breath seems to touch the upper lungs first. The shoulders may not move at all, and yet the collarbone area can feel faintly lifted from within. A small bloom of space, then a soft release. At other times, breathing is more diaphragm-led, with the chest remaining calm and nearly unchanged. The diaphragm, a broad dome of muscle beneath the lungs, lowers on inhalation, creating gentle negative pressure that draws air inward. The belly and lower ribs may respond, widening slightly. And even then, the chest still plays its quiet part, not absent, just subtle, an accompaniment rather than the lead. These patterns can trade places. They can blend. They can drift back and forth through the day and through the night, depending on posture, temperature, mood, and countless signals the nervous system receives without turning them into words. There is no single signature the breath must keep. There is simply breath, adapting. If attention happens to rest near the chest, it may notice how the ribs are never rigid. Bone is firm, but the joints between ribs and spine allow a fine elasticity. Cartilage at the front yields slightly. Intercostal muscles, layered between the ribs, assist with the small lift and the gentle recoil. Everything is designed for repetition without strain, for movement that can be minimal and still complete. Exhalation can feel like the body being allowed to return. The ribs ease inward, the lungs recoil, and air flows out along the same pathways it came in. Often, exhalation lasts a little longer than inhalation, not as a rule to follow, just as a common shape the rhythm takes. A shorter opening, a longer softening. A quiet making room, a quiet letting go. In stillness, especially as night deepens, the chest may seem to do less and less. Not because anything is missing, but because the work becomes so efficient that it hardly announces itself. The breath can grow smaller in the upper body, lighter in the ribs, more distant in sensation. The movements may become so refined that the chest looks almost unchanged, while life continues with steady precision underneath. Sometimes a deeper breath arrives on its own, widening the ribs a little more, as if the body is stretching from the inside. Sometimes breaths become shallower for a while, delicate and fine. The rhythm can pause briefly at the turning points, a moment of still air before the next movement begins. Not held, not managed, simply a natural punctuation. In the background, The brainstem keeps time with chemical signals in the blood, adjusting the pattern from moment to moment. Networks of nerves carry information between lungs, chest wall, and brain, creating a loop of sensation and response. And in calmer states, this loop can become quieter, less insistent, less vivid, as if the system has fewer reasons to call for attention. So the chest continues, subtly changing shape. A mild expansion. A soft settling. Ribs widening by millimeters, then returning. Breath moving where it moves. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, sometimes spread evenly like a thin warmth. The body keeps its own gentle rhythm, repeating itself in small variations, and in that repetition, the chest becomes a quiet space where motion and stillness meet, again and again. Inhalation can be felt as a mild arrival, a quiet gathering of air that simply joins the body for a moment. It is not dramatic. It does not need to announce itself. It can be as small as a thin thread, or as full as a gentle filling, and it keeps appearing in its own time, like a rhythm that remembers its way. Air comes in through familiar pathways, passing the edges of the nose and the soft space of the throat, moving toward the lungs where countless tiny surfaces wait in calm readiness. Inside the chest, there is a subtle sense of widening, not forced, not urgent. The ribs make a little more room. The diaphragm, a broad sheet of muscle beneath the lungs, eases downward in its natural motion, and the inner spaces respond. The body does not need a plan for this. It is built to make space. Sometimes inhalation is easy to notice, and sometimes it is barely there, almost private. In quieter moments, it can feel like a soft lift under the sternum, or a mild spreading through the sides of the rib cage, or a gentle movement low in the torso, where the abdomen rises a little as the diaphragm shifts. The same breath can seem to arrive in different places at different times, changing without needing any particular reason. The body allows these variations without question. There is also the simple character of the air itself. Often, what enters is slightly cooler, carrying the faint freshness of the surrounding room. It may feel dry or smooth, light or a little dense, depending on the night, the season, the air nearby. As it moves inward, it warms, taking on the body's temperature, becoming less distinct as it blends into what is already here. Breath is constantly meeting the world and then becoming part of the body's inner climate. Inhalation is not always a perfect arc. It can have tiny hesitations, small changes of pace, brief places where it seems to pause without fully stopping. A slight catch, a small delay, a moment of stillness at the top. These are ordinary features of living breath. The nervous system and the muscles of breathing adjust in fine detail, responding to posture, to drowsiness, to sound, to thought, to nothing in particular. The breath does not have to be smooth to be natural. It does not have to be consistent to be right. Each inhalation is a kind of opening, but a modest one. The air arrives, the chest receives, and the lungs quietly expand, their elastic tissues stretching with ease. Deep inside, in the branching structures of the airways, the movement is gentle and distributed, reaching small pockets that exchange gases without any conscious involvement. Oxygen drifts across thin membranes into the bloodstream, and carbon dioxide makes its way out, all of it happening in a steady, automatic commerce. The mind may be awake to this, or it may not. Either way, the exchange continues. As stillness grows, inhalation often becomes softer at the edges, less like an effort and more like an appearance. In the background, the brainstem keeps time, sending calm signals that coordinate the diaphragm and the muscles between the ribs. In scientific language, breathing is shaped by networks that balance chemistry and sensation, adjusting to the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen, and to the quiet feedback from the lungs and airways. This is not a performance. It is regulation, gentle and continuous, like a dim light that stays on through the night. Sometimes the inhale seems to gather the body inward, as if collecting scattered sensations into one simple movement. And sometimes it feels like nothing at all, as if the body is breathing on its own somewhere at a distance, the way a tide moves even when it is not being watched. The breath can be close, then far, then close again, with no need to hold on to any particular version of it. Inhalation arrives, fills, and eases. It may be followed by a quiet hover, a small suspension that does not demand attention. The body is allowed to pause. It is allowed to hesitate. Nothing is missing when there is a brief stillness between breaths. Nothing needs to be corrected. In the spaciousness of night, the inhale can become a softer widening, a gentler gathering, and then, naturally, it gives way, again and again, to whatever comes next. The out-breath has a quiet way of leaving. It does not need to be arranged. It simply eases away, like a small weight shifting off a surface, like a gentle releasing that happens on its own. Air that was inside becomes air that is outside again, returning to the room, returning to the night, returning to whatever space surrounds the body. Exhalation is often less about doing, and more about allowing what is already ready to go. The chest can settle. The ribs can drift inward with a soft, natural recoil. The diaphragm, which lowered to make room, can rise again as that room is no longer needed in the same way. There is a sense of completion in it, not dramatic, not final, just a simple finishing of one small cycle. In the body, the out-breath is a moving stream of air passing upward through the lungs and airways. It travels through branching tubes that become larger as they approach the center, gathering into the windpipe, and then through the throat and mouth, or the throat and nose, depending on what happens to be open and easy. The air may feel warm as it leaves, carrying a little heat from inside. It may feel faintly textured, or perfectly smooth, or almost too subtle to notice at all. Sometimes, when the surroundings grow quieter, the out-breath seems to take its time. It may become a little longer, or simply softer at the end, thinning out as if it is dissolving into the air. Not as a plan, not as a technique, just as one of the many ways breathing can appear during stillness. There can be an unhurried quality to it, a gentle tapering, as though the breath is less interested in making a sound. As air leaves, the face can change in small ways. The jaw may hang a fraction looser. The tongue may rest more heavily. The lips may part, or they may touch lightly, without effort. The muscles around the eyes and forehead sometimes smooth, sometimes not, and either way the breath continues. The throat may feel wide and simple, or it may feel narrow and delicate, and then widen again. These are ordinary variations, small adjustments that come and go while the body keeps breathing. In a calm description of physiology, exhalation can be seen as the body returning toward its resting shape. The elastic tissues of the lungs and chest wall contribute, the ribs and their joints contribute, the diaphragm contributes. Even the abdomen can take part, with a quiet rise as the diaphragm lifts. It is a coordinated loosening, not a forceful push, not a performance, just a natural settling that is already built in. There are moments when the out-breath seems to make space, not as an intention, just as a feeling that accompanies it. Space in the chest, space behind the breastbone, space at the base of the throat, space in the room as the air merges with the air around it. And then the next in-breath arrives, unannounced, like a visitor who knows the way. Breathing has this repeating shape. In-breath arrives. Out-breath goes. Again and again. Air enters, air leaves. A quiet exchange that never needs a comment from the mind. Even when attention drifts toward it, and then drifts away, the rhythm continues, responsive and alive, adjusting in the background with no need to be managed. Some nights, the out-breath can become so light it barely seems like a movement. It may feel distant, as if it is happening farther down in the chest, or farther away in the room. Sometimes it is the opposite, more noticeable for a while, then less. The body can explore these possibilities without naming them, without trying to keep them. In studies of breathing and the resting brain, slow, steady breathing is often associated with quieter activity in certain networks, with a gentle shift toward settling. It can be described without urgency, as one of many natural patterns the nervous system can express. No single breath needs to accomplish anything. The body simply continues its ongoing conversation with the air. And so the cycle repeats in its own time. In-breath arrives, filling and lifting. Out-breath goes, easing and softening. The throat, the jaw, the face may subtly change as the air leaves, then return to neutral. The chest rises, the chest falls. The breath becomes faint, then clearer, then faint again, like a tide that never asks permission. Out-breath after out-breath, there is this simple letting go that happens by itself. Air leaving. The body settling. The room receiving it. In-breath arriving again, as it always does. Out-breath going again, as it always can. Again and again, quiet and ordinary, a living rhythm carrying itself through the night. Between one breath and the next, there can be a quiet pause. It is often so small it barely registers, a brief resting point where the body seems to hover for a moment, neither drawing air in nor letting it go. Sometimes that pause is clear, like a soft comma in a sentence. Sometimes it is absent, and the breath simply turns around, exhale becoming inhale with no noticeable space at all. Either way, the rhythm continues, uncomplicated and intact. This in-between is not a gap that needs to be filled. It is simply part of how breathing can appear when it is observed closely. A gentle change in direction, a momentary settling in the muscles of the ribs and the diaphragm. After an exhale, the chest may feel slightly lower, the belly slightly less full, the throat and nasal passages quietly open. The airways remain ready, and the lungs remain elastic, always returning toward balance. At times, the pause arrives before the inhale. The exhale completes, and there is a small stillness, as if the body is listening to itself. At other times, the pause arrives after the inhale. The chest and upper lungs hold their shape for a brief instant before the air begins to leave again. And at other times, there is no pause to notice at all, only the smooth turning of one phase into another, like a tide that changes direction without any abrupt line. Inside the chest, the breath is shaped by simple structures doing what they do. The diaphragm, a broad muscle beneath the lungs, shifts down and up in a patient cycle. Between the ribs, small muscles subtly adjust the size of the rib cage. The lungs themselves do not pull. They follow, expanding as space is made for them, recoiling as that space eases. Even in the quietest pause, this living system is present, responsive, and steady. The pause can feel spacious, even when it is brief. It can feel like a room of still air, a neutral moment that belongs to neither inhaling nor exhaling. And yet it is also ordinary. The body does not treat it as an event. It comes and goes, sometimes lengthening in the calm of stillness, sometimes disappearing during a swallow, a shift in attention, or a faint change in temperature in the nose. During nighttime rest, breathing often becomes less pronounced. Movements that felt clear earlier may grow smaller. The breath can soften, the sound of airflow in the nostrils growing faint, the rise of the chest gentler, the belly's motion more subtle. In that softer rhythm, the pause may become easier to sense, not because it is being made, but because everything around it is quieter. Physiology describes breathing as a rhythm shaped by the brainstem and by circulating signals in the blood, quietly tracking levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen. That background regulation continues without thought. It can slow or quicken, deepen or lighten, shifting with sleep stages, with dreams, with the simple turning of the body in the dark. And within those shifts, the pause appears when it appears, like a natural interval that belongs to the same system. Sometimes awareness notices the pause and then drifts away. Sometimes awareness returns in the middle of an inhale or halfway through an exhale, with no need to catch up. The breath does not require an observer. It continues through distraction, through silence, through the small blank spaces where the mind is not holding any particular thought. There may be moments when the pause feels like a gentle bottoming out after the exhale, the body resting on a quiet threshold. The throat is still. The jaw is still. The shoulders are still. Air is not moving for a beat. Then, without announcement, the next inhale begins, not forced and not planned, simply arriving. And there may be moments when the pause is barely there, just a soft turning point. Exhale thins and fades, and inhale begins as if the air has decided to return on its own. The change can be so smooth that the boundary disappears, leaving only an easy continuity, one breath blending into the next. In this way, the pause is not a technique and not a signal to do anything. It is a small, variable feature of natural breathing, sometimes spacious, sometimes fleeting, sometimes invisible. The body knows how to move through it. The body knows how to skip it. The body knows how to rest within it. And as the night continues, the breath can grow quieter still, as if it is moving farther away, deeper inside its own rhythm. Inhale, exhale, and the in-between, appearing, fading, returning, while the steady work of breathing carries on, calmly, in the background, whether it is being noticed or not. At night, the world around the body tends to offer less to respond to. Light is lower, sounds are fewer or farther away, and movement becomes small and occasional. The air in a room can feel more even, the edges of things less sharp. In that kind of quiet, the breath often shows a different side of itself, not as something to manage, but as a rhythm that simply continues, adjusting to what the night is like. Breathing is always in conversation with the moment. In daytime, it may keep pace with speech, posture, and shifting attention. At night, with fewer changes to track, the body can linger in stillness for longer stretches. And the breath, made from muscle motion and airflow and gentle pressure changes, often settles into smaller movements. The chest may rise a little less. The diaphragm may glide rather than press. The throat may feel more open, not because anything has been done, but because the surrounding effort of the day is no longer being asked for. In a quiet room, it can be easier to notice how a breath arrives and leaves. Inhalation appearing as a soft widening, exhalation as a release of that widening. Sometimes the pause between them is brief, almost unremarkable. Sometimes it lengthens by a fraction, as if the body is listening before it continues. There is nothing fixed about it. The timing can change from 1 minute to the next, even when nothing else seems to change. During extended stillness, breathing often becomes less effortful in the way walking becomes less effortful when you stop walking. Muscles that were holding the torso upright all day may begin to do less. The rib spaces can loosen slightly. The belly may move more freely under the quiet work of the diaphragm. Air continues to pass in and out, warmed and humidified as it moves through the nose and throat, exchanging gases in the lungs without needing attention. The body does what bodies do, in the background, with a steadiness that doesn't announce itself. And still, the rhythm is allowed to vary. A deeper breath may come through, fuller than the ones around it, as if making room. A sigh may happen, not dramatic, just a longer exhale passing through. A swallow might interrupt the flow for a moment, the throat shifting, then the breath returning to its previous pattern. Sometimes there is a small catch, then a smoothing out. Sometimes the opposite, a smooth stretch, then a brief unevenness. The breath doesn't insist on being perfectly even. It tends to circle back toward what is comfortable for the body in that moment. As the night continues, the surroundings keep offering fewer signals. Less to look at, less to answer, fewer sounds that carry meaning. With that reduced stimulation, the nervous system often shows quieter patterns, and breathing can reflect that quiet without needing to be guided. In some scientific descriptions, slower breathing is associated with calmer brain activity and a shift toward restful states. It can be spoken of in terms of signaling and sensitivity, of feedback loops between lungs, heart, and brainstem. And even with those terms, the lived experience remains simple. A soft rise, a soft fall, and the space between. The breath can feel closer at first, easy to notice, like a small animal moving gently under the ribs. Then, without any clear moment of change, it may feel more distant. Not gone, just less central. The inhale may shorten slightly. The exhale may spread out, thinning into the room's quiet. The chest may barely lift. The belly may do most of the visible work, or the breath may be so subtle it's sensed more as a calm pressure change than a movement. Now and then, a bigger breath appears again, as if the body checks in with itself. A breath that fills more of the lungs, followed by an ordinary one. The pattern continues. Smaller, slightly larger. A pause, a softening. The airways remain open pathways, the lungs elastic and responsive, the diaphragm repeating its gentle downward and upward sweep. It is repetitive, and it is never exactly the same. In the steady conditions of night, the rhythm often becomes smoother in texture. Less edge to it, less sound. The breath can turn quiet enough that it seems to blend with the stillness around it, as though the room is breathing too, in its own slow way. And when awareness drifts away, the breath keeps moving. When awareness returns, it is there again, already underway, already settled into whatever pace fits the moment. There can be long stretches where almost nothing happens except this ongoing exchange, air arriving, air leaving, while the rest of the body grows heavier and more supported by the surface beneath it. The breath remains living and responsive, but it has fewer reasons to be brisk. It doesn't need to be large to be complete. It doesn't need to be perfectly timed to be reliable. It simply continues, softer and softer at times, then a little fuller, then soft again, moving through the night as naturally as the night moves around it. In quiet rooms and in laboratories filled with soft lights and steady instruments, people have spent time simply noticing breath. Not to control it, and not to make it do anything special, but to watch what it tends to do on its own. They record the gentle rise and fall of the chest, the subtle movement low in the ribs, the faint sound of air passing through the nose or the mouth. And they notice that, in many ordinary moments of stillness, breathing often becomes slower and smaller and less pronounced, as if it is settling into the background. Researchers sometimes describe an association between these slower patterns and signs of a calmer nervous system. Not as a rule, not as a promise, just as a tendency that appears in measurements. A little less hurried activity in certain signals. A little more of the body's quiet mode showing through. The breath, in these observations, looks less like a deliberate action and more like a living rhythm that responds to the conditions around it. Light and dark, movement and rest, thought and silence. Inside the body, that rhythm is carried along by simple structures that have been working since the earliest days of life. Air moving down branching airways, widening and narrowing like a tree. Tiny air sacs exchanging gases without any need for attention. Muscles that shift space in the chest, making room, then letting it go again. The diaphragm, broad and patient, easing downward and then returning. The ribs making a small opening gesture, then a small closing one. Inhale arriving. Exhale leaving. Over and over, with no need for commentary. There is also a long, wandering nerve that quietly connects parts of the brain with organs in the chest and belly, sometimes called the vagus nerve. It is often mentioned when people talk about the body's settling responses. It carries messages in both directions, like a two-way path. In plain terms, it is one of the ways the body stays in touch with itself. When the body is safe enough to soften, this pathway is often described as more active, more present, not dramatically, just steadily, like a dimmer switch turned low. Some researchers use the phrase parasympathetic tone to describe this background of resting activity. It is a technical phrase, but the idea is simple. There is a side of the nervous system that tends to accompany digestion, repair, and quiet wakefulness. And there is a side that tends to accompany alertness and rapid readiness. Most lives contain both, in shifting proportions, minute by minute. And the breath, by its nature, is always there in the middle, moving between, responsive and honest. In a calm setting, the out-breath is often a little longer than the in-breath, without anyone trying. It can feel like a small letting go, a release of space. The throat and jaw may loosen slightly. The belly may become softer. The shoulders may settle closer to where they naturally belong. None of this has to be searched for. It is simply what is sometimes seen, and sometimes felt, when the body is left alone long enough. Attention, too, has its own gentle patterns. Sometimes the mind is busy, and the breath keeps moving underneath, steady and quiet. Sometimes attention brushes against the breath for a moment, noticing coolness at the nostrils, or warmth as the air leaves. Noticing the pause that can appear at the end of an exhale, a small still point, and then the next inhale beginning in its own time. When attention rests on these simple sensations, mental activity is sometimes observed to soften a little, like a room growing dimmer as evening arrives. Not always. Not on command. Just as one of the many natural pairings in the body. The science here is not a set of instructions. It is more like a window. A view of how closely linked the systems are. The lungs and the heart, with their shared space and shared timing. The breath and the rhythms of the brain, with their changing waves of activity. The body's internal signals, rising and falling like tides, meeting the breath as it comes and goes. And very quickly, the words can step back, leaving the direct experience in front again. Air entering, cool and light. Air leaving, slightly warmer, slightly softer. The chest making a modest motion. The diaphragm doing its quiet work. A breath that belongs to the body, not to a plan. In nighttime stillness, breathing can become so subtle it feels far away, like sound in another room. It continues even when thoughts drift, even when awareness fades and returns. A responsive rhythm, adjusting itself without effort. A calm exchange, repeating in darkness, repeating in quiet, repeating in its own familiar way. Inhale and exhale, rising and falling, present and then barely noticed as the body rests in the simple fact of being supported. In quiet moments, the breath can begin to feel like part of the background. Not something that needs attention, and not something that disappears, just something that keeps going in its own way. Like a familiar sound in the distance that has always been there, steady and unbothered, blending gently into the larger hush. Breathing is a living rhythm, shaped by soft tissues and open spaces. Air moves through the nose and throat, down into branching passages, and into the lungs where thin surfaces meet the blood. Oxygen and carbon dioxide trade places without ceremony, guided by simple chemistry and pressure. The muscles of the chest and the diaphragm respond, expanding and releasing. Then the next breath arrives when it arrives, as natural as a tide turning. Sometimes, as stillness grows, the breath feels a little deeper. Not bigger in any dramatic way, just slightly more spacious, as if the body is using more of its available room. The diaphragm lowers and rises. The ribs shift subtly. The belly may move a little, or the movement may be so small it barely registers. The breath can be quiet enough to seem farther away, like it has stepped back from the front of the mind. At other times, breathing may feel light and fine, almost like a thread. A small motion. A faint exchange. The inhale comes. The exhale follows, and the pauses between them can lengthen or shorten in their own timing. There is no single pattern that needs to happen. The body's own sensing systems adjust breath from moment to moment, responding to temperature, to darkness, to fatigue, to the simple act of resting. Even when thoughts are present, the breath continues underneath them. Thoughts can appear like brief images on water, forming and fading, breaking apart, joining into other thoughts, then dissolving again. The breath does not argue with any of it. In the background, air continues to move, and the body continues to exchange gases, balancing itself quietly. There can be a gentle sense that something steady remains, even as the mind drifts. The nervous system has its own nightly shift, a change in tone that often comes with reduced movement and lower stimulation. Many researchers describe slow, unforced breathing as being associated with calmer patterns in the brain and heart, as if the body recognizes the quieter environment and responds with quieter signals. It is not a switch that has to be flipped. It is more like a gradual dimming, a settling that happens in the same way a room becomes darker as the sun goes down. Breath can be present without being centered. It can be noticed, then not noticed. It can come close for a moment, then recede again. Sometimes there is a clear feeling of the lungs filling and emptying. Sometimes the sensation is vague, spread out, almost distant. The body does not require a spotlight to keep its rhythms going. It is built to maintain them, even when awareness floats elsewhere. In rest, the exhale often becomes a little longer, simply because the body is not asking for as much. The release can feel smooth, and the next inhale can arrive without any sense of effort. The muscles that shape breathing keep working, but they can work more softly, like hands that know their task well. With fewer demands, The breath can become quieter, less insistent, less detailed. And all the while, the body continues its maintenance. Circulation carries nutrients and heat. Cells repair tiny wear and tear. Hormones shift with the time of day. The immune system keeps watch in its calm, methodical way. The brain sorts and stores, and clears byproducts through slow-moving channels. None of this needs to be supervised. It happens as part of being alive, part of being supported by a bed, by a room, by gravity, by the ordinary safety of stillness. The breath is included in that support. It moves on its own, responsive and adaptable, sometimes close enough to hear, sometimes so quiet it seems like it belongs to the room rather than the body. Inhale, exhale. A pause. Another inhale. Another exhale. The rhythm can be steady or irregular, or somewhere in between, and it remains reliable in its own way. If awareness returns to the breath, it may find it already there, already moving, already taking care of itself. If awareness wanders away, the breath does not follow. It stays in the background, doing what it does, the soft motion beneath everything, beneath thoughts, beneath silence, beneath the slow turning of the night. Breathing has a simple way of returning to itself. A small rise and a small fall. A quiet gathering of air, and a quiet release. Again and again, not as a pattern to follow, but as a living motion that continues on its own, even when attention drifts away. In the body, breath is made of ordinary things. Air moving through the nose and throat. The gentle work of the diaphragm, widening space below the lungs. The ribs making room with a subtle outward turn, then easing back. Nothing dramatic. Mostly quiet. Mostly familiar. A rhythm that can be close enough to notice, and then distant again, without needing anything from you. Sometimes the inhale feels like a soft arrival. Coolness at the nostrils. A faint lift under the breastbone. A slight widening along the sides of the ribcage. And sometimes it is barely felt at all, more like a change in pressure than a sensation. The exhale can feel warmer, a little smoother, as air leaves the mouth or the nose. Or it can be almost imperceptible, like a door that closes without sound. The breath keeps moving in this circular way, rising and falling, gathering and releasing, near and distant, the lungs filling, the lungs emptying, the diaphragm descending, the diaphragm returning. A steady exchange that happens in the background of everything else the body is doing, including rest. There can be small movements you might sense without looking for them. A slight expansion near the lower ribs. A gentle shift where the belly meets the waistband. A quiet loosening in the upper chest as the exhale trails off. Even the throat can feel different from moment to moment, sometimes open and smooth, sometimes just neutral and unnoticed, as air passes through. And beneath all of that, there is the weight of the body at rest. Weight in the shoulders, in the hips, in the legs. Weight that does not need to be held up so much. The surface beneath you receiving that weight in an uncomplicated way. While the breath continues, rising and falling inside this stillness, like a tide that has no destination. As the surrounding world becomes less demanding, breathing often becomes less pronounced. Not as a change to achieve, just as something that can happen. The inhale may shorten slightly or soften at the edges. The exhale may lengthen without being pushed, simply lingering as muscles let go of their small work. There can be pauses that appear naturally, brief spaces where the body seems to wait, neither taking in air nor sending it out, just hovering for a moment in between. In quiet states, the nervous system can respond to this slower exchange in its own way. The brain reads signals from the lungs and chest wall, from the diaphragm and the airways. It notices carbon dioxide levels, stretch and pressure, the rhythm of movement. It adjusts without discussion, without effort, keeping the inner environment steady. Even when breathing is barely on your mind, it remains responsive, fine-tuning itself like a background instrument. So the breath continues to return. A small rise, a small fall, a gathering, a release. Sometimes it feels close, as if you could count the waves. Sometimes it slips farther away, as if it belongs to the room itself, mingling with the quiet air around you. And it can move between those two experiences, near and distant, without any need to choose. You might notice the warmth of exhale again, soft against the upper lip or inside the nostrils. You might notice the ribs yielding inward, just a little, as the lungs empty. You might notice nothing at all for a while, only the sense of being supported, and then a gentle return of sensation. A faint lift, a faint settle. Breathing does not need to be perfect to be steady. It can be uneven for a moment, then smooth again. It can be shallow, then fuller, then quiet. It can pause briefly, then resume. The body has lived with these variations since the beginning, adjusting in small, invisible ways. And through it all, the same simple motion keeps happening. Air arriving, air leaving. The chest making room. The chest releasing room. The diaphragm moving down, and then up. A rhythm that doesn't require an audience, and doesn't demand attention, yet remains available to be noticed whenever awareness happens to pass by. Rise and fall. Gather and release, near and distant. A soft inhale and a softer exhale. A quiet exchange, repeating in the dark, repeating in the stillness, repeating in the calm mechanical kindness of the body's own night rhythm. Breathing keeps its own quiet schedule. It does not reach an ending or arrive at a final moment. It simply continues, as steady as the body that carries it. In the background of the night, air comes in, and air goes out, and the pattern remains open, with nothing to complete. There is a simple exchange taking place, again and again. A movement of air through the nose or mouth. A gentle widening inside the chest. A soft shifting lower down, where the diaphragm rests like a calm, responsive floor. On one breath it rises slightly, on another it settles. The muscles involved are ordinary and patient, built for repetition, built for long stretches of time. In quiet hours, the breath often resembles a tide that has no destination. It rolls in, it rolls out. Sometimes it is fuller, sometimes thinner. Sometimes the inhale seems to arrive first, and sometimes the exhale seems to be what remains. The body does not need to announce these changes. They appear on their own, in small variations that come and go. The diaphragm continues its subtle work. A dome of muscle under the lungs, making room with each downward drift, then returning upward as the air leaves. Around it, the ribs can lift and release, almost imperceptibly. In the throat, passages stay gently open. In the lungs, air spreads into branching spaces, touching tiny surfaces where oxygen and carbon dioxide trade places without any sound. The exhale can become the most noticeable part, not because it is stronger, but because it fades. It trails away, thinning until it is nearly absent. A soft departure. And after that soft departure, there can be a pause that is not held, just present. A brief stillness between movements, like the moment after a wave withdraws, when the shoreline is quiet. Breath has a way of matching the setting. In daytime it may keep pace with walking, speaking, shifting. At night it is often smaller, slower, less insistent. The body uses less energy when it is still. The need for air becomes simpler. The breathing rhythm can loosen, as if giving itself more space, as if it no longer needs to mark time so clearly. Inside the nervous system, signals continue to move along familiar pathways. The brainstem keeps watch over the basic rhythm. Nerves that travel through the chest and throat carry information back and forth, a steady conversation between lungs, heart, and brain. In research, slower breathing is often described alongside quieter patterns of brain activity and calmer autonomic balance. Not as a switch to flip, but as a natural accompaniment that tends to appear when the body is safe enough to soften. Even then, the breath remains free to vary. A deeper inhale may happen for no reason that needs naming. A shallower breath may follow. A sigh may pass through, clearing a small tension in the chest, then disappearing. The rhythm does not argue with these changes. It absorbs them and continues. In the chest, the rise and fall can become so slight that it is more sensed than seen. The collarbones stay still. The shoulders do not need to join in. The center of the torso does its quiet work, the diaphragm responding with small, reliable motions. Air moves in cool and clean, then moves out a little warmer, carrying away what the body no longer needs. The night continues in the same open way. There is no finish line in the dark, no requirement for the breath to become anything in particular. The inhalation can be a simple arrival. The exhalation can be a simple release. Each one complete in itself, and yet not concluding anything. Sometimes awareness floats near the breath, noticing the soft sound at the nostrils, the faint expansion under the ribs, the gentle emptying. Sometimes awareness drifts away, and the breath remains, unobserved, still faithful. It does not change its attitude when it is noticed, and it does not withdraw when it is forgotten. Like a tide returning and returning, it keeps a calm, repeating shape. The lungs filling, the diaphragm lowering, the ribs making room. The lungs emptying, the diaphragm rising, the chest settling back into stillness. A quiet exhale dissolving into a small pause. Then another inhale, unhurried, already on its way. And so it goes on, in the background, steady and ongoing. Breath moving through the body as the night holds its silence. Wave after wave, without an ending, without a need to arrive anywhere, continuing in its own gentle time.